Hey, so on today's podcast, we wanted to talk about why it is that kids, even from a really young age, are
Mm.
so drawn to junk and processed foods.
Mhm.
So, if your kids are sugar fiends, or they're feeling that pull just to eat only processed foods, then today's podcast is definitely for you.
Mm. So, why are kids so drawn to processed foods and sugar?
Yeah. Look, the human brain, it contains a neural structure called the reward system. It's a primal structure, so
Mhm.
it exists just to reward us with a bunch of really feel-good chemicals when we do something to actually improve our chances of survival.
Mhm.
So eating, obviously, is essential to our
Mhm.
survival. So one of these feel good chemicals that's released when we eat processed food is dopamine.
Mm.
And when it's released, a child's brain or even an adult's brain actually registers pleasure.
Yeah.
So, our kids are biologically wired to seek out foods that stimulate this reward system and thus release dopamine.
Mhm.
In the short term, it makes them feel really good.
Mhm.
Food manufacturers and junk food companies, they 100% know this.
Yeah.
It's no coincidence that they deliberately engineer foods that target these evolutionary impulses, and they engage the reward system of the brain
Mm.
in a way that nothing natural, no whole food can engage
Mm.
that part of your brain in the same way that processed food can.
Yeah.
Because the fat and the sugar that is found in processed food is just not easy to come by in nature. So our brains have evolved to drive us to seek out as much as we can possibly get to, I suppose just enhance our survival, like I said originally.
Yeah.
But the human body, it always does its best to maintain equilibrium or balance.
Mhm.
So when this reward system's triggered and dopamine's released, often our brains recognize that there's a large amount of this one particular neurotransmitter.
Mhm.
And it starts to remove dopamine receptor sites just in order to keep
Mm.
all of your neurotransmitters balanced,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
So the less receptors your child has, the more dopamine they actually need to feel good.
Ah.
Therefore, it triggers that desire for more and more junk food.
Yep.
Just to reach that same level of satisfaction. And this is part, not all, but it is a small part of why our kids are just so tenacious and they badger us so much for sugary processed foods, refined carbohydrates, foods that we might label as treats, perhaps.
Yeah.
This biological, like this basic biological need is actually driving them.
Yeah. And I can even think of myself.
Yes.
After Easter.
100%. Oh,
when you're eating chocolate eggs and you
Yes.
just want more of them.
mhm.
Yep. So if parents have recognized that their kids are seeking out processed foods, lots of sugar, how do you transition them to eating more whole foods?
Yeah, look, transitioning kids to more whole foods or a whole foods based diet, it takes time and it takes patience. First up, it's not an overnight project.
Yeah.
It's not something that you can just flick a switch and they're all of a sudden going to start loving whole foods. And I think this is why sometimes parents do give up on
so true. Yes.
because it's hard. It takes some hard work.
Yeah.
But, I just want to say that your kids are so worth it.
Yeah.
And their long-term health and their long-term relationship with food is so worth you putting the effort in. And the younger your kids are, the easier it is to retrain them to enjoy eating whole foods.
And I'm even thinking, when your kids are having a lot of sugar, their behaviors go through they're hyperactive. It really impacts their behavior.
Everything.
Yeah, their
Everything.
moods, their capacity to learn. So
And the relationship that you can end up developing with your kids as well can be impacted if their moods are erratic and they're unable to sit still or concentrate and focus.
Yeah, so I'm thinking of how we've spoken before, like that short-term pain for long-term gain. This is where it's really important again, because it is cracking that sugar. Even for myself, if there's a habit where I've got into having some sweet thing every day over a holiday, and then my body just kind of craves it at that, and it does.
We all know as adults the more crap you eat, the more you feel like eating crap.
Yeah, and the crappier you feel.
Yeah, and exactly. Unless, though, you have been raised, for me, I feel like having been raised by a parent who definitely valued whole foods over processed foods, you've got that
baseline.
That baseline. Yeah. So I always know, like, and that's always there to return to.
Yes.
And that's the important thing.
I agree. And I see that with my kids.
Yeah.
Like now they're teenagers and they go out and they have whatever fast food with their friends, but they'll come home and they'll say, oh my God, I've been eating.
Yeah. And I'm craving a salad, and I'm craving some vegetables or whatever.
Like, yay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, as I said, it's not an overnight project, but the very, very first thing that you need to do is leading by example. You know, children mimic the eating habits of their parents. They do what we do, not what we say.
So true.
So it's super critical that you demonstrate healthy eating habits yourself by consuming whole foods.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm assuming...
Just making it normal.
Totally. I'm assuming you're here because you do value health and you perhaps enjoy eating whole foods yourself. So, you know, yeah, you're setting out on the right foot right from the get-go. Yeah. The next thing is just to introduce whole foods gradually into your child's diet, pulling the rug out from underneath them and saying, right, that's it. You know, we're never eating processed foods again. We're going to discuss this in more detail in another podcast, but it can really push them in the other direction. Yeah. So replacing one processed food at a time with perhaps a whole food alternative each week is a great place to start. Yeah. And this gradual approach just allows them to adjust to new flavors and textures without feeling overwhelmed.
Yes. Or resentful.
Yeah, or resentful. And, you know, like if you make a sweet treat, so, you know, if you're following well-nourished recipes, for example, I am a real Scrooge when I'm designing sweet recipes. Yeah. So if you are deciding to make something that's whole food, perhaps from the well-nourished site, you might actually start with adding a bit more sugar than what I add. Yeah. And once your kids are like, hey, this is delicious, this, you know, this biscuit or slice, then you might actually start to just taper back on the sugar gradually. Yeah. Or if there is a sweet treat from another website, how dare you, that you'd be making, but you're aware there's tons of sugar in it, then again, just start working on just pushing and pulling back on the amount of sugar that you add. The other thing that I really recommend, and this is something I do when we're kind of resetting after those periods, like you said, where we kind of do go off the rails, is really focus on crowding out unhealthy choices. So filling your kids up and filling yourself up, if that's the case, on lots of protein and good fats. Yes.
Makes such a difference.
It does. It satisfies your appetite and your kids' appetite. It keeps their blood sugar levels stable, so their moods are stable and they're much less likely to crave sweets and refined carbohydrates.
I was going to say, when your blood sugar levels are more stable and you've got that more long-term kind of
stability.
They want less sweet stuff,
definitely,
don't they?
100%. Yeah. So that kind of crowding out, as I said, if you feel full up on good stuff, you're less likely to even be inclined to want crappy or processed food. Yeah. The other thing, and we talk about this a lot and we always circle back to this, is getting your kids involved. It's so important, you know, if you're both feeling calm and you're both relaxed and within your window of tolerance, which we've most likely posted that podcast by now, take your kids grocery shopping, involve them in meal preparation. It doesn't have to be anything complicated. It can be something as simple as letting them pick out some fruits and vegetables or other whole foods that they maybe are attracted to when you're at the supermarket. We definitely know that when kids are involved in the cooking process, they're way more likely to try new foods. Yep. So, and as we've said again before, I just want to reiterate, if this is your first time here on the podcast, that when we talk about cooking with kids, we're not talking about baking a cake from start to finish. We're talking about asking them to stir something that's, you know, on the stove, or asking them to pick up the tomato and throw it in the salad bowl, or toss the dressing through the salad bowl. Literally 30 seconds or less, and walk away. Yeah. Obviously, if they're inclined to spend more time in the kitchen, 100%, and you're up for it, roll with that. Yeah. But if it is stressful or cooking with your kids feels stressful, we're not asking you to do that. We're
Yeah.
asking them just to have some kind of participation.
Yes.
Education is so important. We need to talk to our kids about the benefits of whole foods and why they're important for our health. We all need to understand why. When I was practicing as a naturopath, I would never say to someone, oh, you need to eat more protein, and then move on to the next topic. I would always explain why they needed to eat more protein and compel them to make that change in their diet.
When you have the why, hey, and same as kids.
Totally,
when
they need the why.
Why,
yes,
it's not just you saying, eat this and don't eat that.
Totally,
it's
absolutely.
Eat this so that you get stronger, so that your brain can think.
That's
so
it.
That
exactly.
You can see good.
That's it. And you're eating more protein because that helps with, feel good. That makes you feel happier, and it makes your muscles grow, and it makes you grow, and actually talking to them in terms of how it's going to benefit them. It's not enough to just say, I want you to eat this because it's healthy, or I want you to eat this because it's good for you, because unless your child has had a serious illness, being healthy is not something they even comprehend. It's something they completely take for granted.
Totally.
So keep the conversation positive. Focus on how whole foods can make them feel strong or energized or happy. We talk about targeting kids' sweet spots, don't we?
Yeah.
Which is where you talk in terms of something that's important to them. So when my kids were, my son was loving superheroes, I would talk about how a particular whole food, like if I put some veggies on his plate or meat on his plate and he'd turn his nose up, I would pass a comment about, oh, it's a shame, Superman really relies on Brussels sprouts and steak to fly and be as strong as he is.
Spinach helps you run fast.
Totally, and leave it at that.
Yes.
Not go on and on about something. My daughter always wanted longer hair, was her thing, always.
And teenagers with their skin.
Teenagers with skin is the perfect sweet spot for promoting whole foods, without a doubt.
As you're talking about this and educating them, I also wanted to put in how important it is to, when we educate our kids about food and the benefit of the food, and we educate them to get to link that when I eat this, I feel like this.
Yes.
It's really important, especially with the sugar thing, right? When I eat a good, healthy protein meal, I feel good. I can get things done. I can think,
concentrate.
When I eat sugar, I feel like support them to notice, how it impacts their body, how they might have that buzzy high, but then they crash. Because we need to kind of not ram stuff down their throats, but support them to join the dots about how things that they eat make them feel after they've eaten.
Well, it's a skill that we keep with us for life, isn't it? If
very
we
much
understand, like you said earlier, I can't have any bread for lunch. I'm feeling, my digestion's feeling a bit tetchy, and I know that the bread's just going to make me feel bloated. You've made that connection. You've joined the dots at some point in your life. So like you said, when your kids are little, you can do a lot, and I can remember, I may or may not have spoken about this on this podcast. I get confused. I speak on so many different levels to so many different people. Forget what I say and when, but I can remember helping out at my son's school and noticing him from week to week, how he actually was able to sometimes sit and concentrate, and other times I'd go in and help and he'd be a bit all over the place and not really focusing. And then I made the connection with what he'd had for breakfast. When he'd had a really high protein breakfast, he was really stable and really able to concentrate. When he'd had just say like a smoothie and toast or something with no protein, he really was struggling to concentrate at school. And I spoke to him and pointed that out myself, and he was like, now he knows if he doesn't have enough protein, he is not able to concentrate, and he's not able to focus, and he's not able to learn at school. And to this day, that was over 10 years ago that we made that connection. And to this day, he still makes that connection where he says, oh, Mum, I did not eat enough. He'd only had, I remember one day typical growing boy. He's like, oh, I need more than one egg. And I'm like, why? And he's like, how many eggs do you want? He's like, oh, at least 4 or 6.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
like, oh my God, this kid's costing me a fortune.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I was starving and I couldn't concentrate and focus at school because I only had one egg. Like, I didn't have enough protein. He said that just literally a couple of weeks ago to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay, so education, so important.
Yes.
The other thing I would say is that it's up to you as a parent to limit processed food. You know, the availability of processed food in your home needs to be reduced. It needs to be limited. Yeah. You know, if processed snacks are readily available, children and even adults are more likely to choose them over whole food options, even if we know better.
Aren't they? Yeah.
Well, they are. And, you know, like even I know that there's certain foods I do not keep in my cupboard because my restraint, and I'm pretty diligent with what I put in my body, but there are still certain things that I'm like, I know that if I buy that, I'm not going to be able to stop at one. I'm going to want to keep eating it.
Yeah. You know, as you say that, I just want to say we need to limit those processed foods, but show kids options.
Yes.
Like carrot sticks and hummus.
Yeah.
Celery sticks and hummus. Nuts. We need to kind of give them ideas.
And
because I don't know about your kids, but my kids will still open the fridge and say, there's no food.
Oh, mine are always. My daughter the other day said to me, we only have ingredients in this household. And I was proud about that, but she was dirty, like really dirty. But like
we
you
need
said,
to just kind of show them
100% the options, how to make a smoothie.
Exactly.
Lately, my son, if
even
2-minute
cheese
steak
on a healthy cracker.
Yeah,
you know,
2-minute steak has been my saviour for my growing boy recently.
They're brilliant.
Oh, just the best. But yeah, no, you're right. And also working with your kids. There are healthier store-bought options as well.
Yeah.
So we're not just talking that you have to give them carrot sticks and nuts.
No, true.
There are definitely better store-bought options than others.
Yeah.
And doing a little bit of research and, again, working with your kids. I know that there are certain things that I can buy my kids that they can just grab, and they're not perfect by a long stretch. I would much prefer them to cook themselves a decent meal, but we live in the real world. That's not going to happen. A teenage boy flying out the door to sport is not going to always cook himself a healthy meal.
Yeah.
Does sometimes, but often he is not great with time management. So, being patient is super important. We need... If our kids are it's normal for our kids to be a bit hesitant, particularly in the beginning, about trying new foods,
and especially
about
whole foods,
trying
if
certain
they've
whole
been
foods.
used to
Definitely
processed foods with all of that flavour
and all of those
sweetness
and all of those and that feeling that they get after they eat those foods,
and
like
when all
said.
their mates are eating them.
Yeah, absolutely. But we need to, as I said, just take small steps, be persistent, be patient, encourage, small tastes, acknowledge them if they've tried something new, and even if they don't like it, that's fine. Again, no emotion, no disappointment attached to it. All we expect from them is to try something, and then if they don't like it, so be it. We'll find something else for them.
Yeah.
But I do also think it's important to focus on the things that they do like, and when they do find a whole food, or if they do choose a healthier option, to just acknowledge it. You don't have to make a song or dance about it, but just acknowledging that, gee, it's great that that you chose that particular food today for an afternoon snack.
Yeah, and help them notice how they feel after.
Yes.
And how it's different.
Yes.
How you didn't crash this afternoon, like you said.
How did you feel? I often ask, how did you feel at footy training?
Yeah.
Like my son's very sports motivated.
Yeah.
So we've worked a lot and really focused on what makes him feel good as a snack before he goes to training.
Yeah.
And he has soon figured out that if he grabs a muesli bar from the cupboard and it does not do the same thing as him actually as I said, managing his time efficiently and perhaps cooking himself a quick 2-minute steak and stir frying a couple of veg, or actually having a little mini meal is what we've worked out. And it's different for every child. That's not going to suit everyone. Yeah. But for him, it serves him performance-wise a lot better than him having a quick smoothie or a piece of fruit or something that's not going to kind of sustain him. So, as I said, just remember every child is different. We're using examples of what's worked for us and our kids. Yeah. But finding what works for your family can take some time. Yes. But keeping lines of communication open, being flexible in your approach.
Keeping the long game in mind.
Yes.
That you're setting them up for a way better life off into adulthood when you're teaching them how to prepare whole foods for themselves rather than just grabbing an easy processed food that destroys health.
Yeah, absolutely.
Over time.
Yeah. So hopefully that gives you some ideas of some little strategies for switching out processed foods for more whole foods.
Yes.